Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever in the world you're tuning in from. Welcome to the Mighty Miracle Man Ministry. Today, Palm Sunday, I'm gonna go through the week leading up to Jesus' death and resurrection from the Bible and lay out passages and help you see the truth. Let's dive in, shall we? First, the triumphal entry on Palm Sunday story. It was the beginning of the Passover week, and Jesus was approaching Jerusalem. As he came near Bethpage and Beth, Bethany and the Mount of Olives, he sent two of his disciples ahead with the specific task: go into the village ahead of you, he said, and you will find a donkey tied there with her colt beside her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone asks what you're doing, say the Lord needs them, and they will let you go. The disciples obeyed and found everything just as Jesus had said. They brought the donkey and the colt, placed their cloaks on them, and Jesus sat on the colt, a young donkey that had never been ridden. This fulfilled what had been written by the prophet Zechariah. Say to the daughter of Zion, behold, your king comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. That's Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. As Jesus entered the road down the Mount of Olives, the large crowd that had gathered for Passover recognized him. Word had spread that he had raised Lazarus from the dead, and many came out to see him. Moved with excitement and reverence, they laid their cloaks on the road, while others cut branches from palm trees and spread them out before him, a gesture reserved for royalty. The people began to shout with joy, Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the King of Israel. Hosanna in the highest heaven. The whole city was stirred, and many asked, who is this? The crowds answered, this is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee. But not everyone rejoiced. Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to Jesus, Teacher, rebuke your disciples. Jesus replied, I tell you, if they keep quiet, the stones will cry out. As he drew near to Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it. If you, even you, had only one would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes. He said, foretelling the judgment of them would come because they did not recognize the time of God's visitation. When Jesus entered Jerusalem, he went into the temple. He looked around and everything, but since it was already late, he left and went to Bethany with the 12. Now for the Monday after Palm Sunday. Okay, so this is the day Jesus clears the temple with a whip in righteous anger. In the morning after his triumphal entry into Jerusalem, Jesus rose early in Bethany. He and his disciples set out for the city once again, walking the dusty path toward the Temple Mount. As they walked, Jesus felt hungry. In the distance, he saw a fig tree in leaf and approached it, hoping to find fruit, but there were no figs, just leaves, because it was not the season for figs. Jesus looked at the tree and said, "May you no one ever eat fruit from you again." His disciples heard him saying, and though they didn't fully understand in that moment, the lesson would become clear later. Arriving in Jerusalem, Jesus went straight to the temple. When he found there stood his righteous anger, the outer courts, the place meant for worship and prayer, had been overtaken by merchants, money changers, and those selling animals for sacrifice. It was noisy, crowded, and full of greed. Jesus entered the temple courts and began to drive out all who were buying and selling there without branded cord for whip. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves. Coins scattered across the floor. Animals were chased down. The sound of chaos echoed through the temple. He would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. Then he stood and taught the people, saying, "It is written, my house will be called the house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers." The chief priests and scribes were outraged. They began plotting how they might kill Jesus, for they feared his influence, yet they couldn't act because the crowds were hanging on his every word. Later that evening, Jesus and his disciples left the city again and returned to Bethany, where they rested. The temple had been shaken, the people were stirred, and the leaders were angry, and Jesus, zealous for his Father's house, had made clear that true worship could not be bought or sold Tuesday. If this is what Jesus teaches, confronts, and prophesies. As the sun rose on Tuesday morning, Jesus and his disciples walked back into Jerusalem. On the way, they passed the same fig tree Jesus had cursed the day before and had withered from the roots, completely dried up. Peter was astonished. Rabbi, look, the fig tree you cursed has withered. Jesus replied, teaching them a lesson in faith. Have faith in God. If you say to this mountain, be thrown into the sea, and do not doubt in your heart, it will be done. Whenever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. When they entered the temple, Jesus was immediately confronted by the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. They demanded to know, by what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you this authority? Jesus answered the question with a question of his own. John's baptism, was it from heaven or from men? But he didn't stop there. He launched into parables aimed directly at the religious leaders. The parable of the two sons, and the parable of the tenants, and the parable of the wedding banquet, all exposing their hypocrisy and rejection of God's messengers, including himself. Infuriating the Pharisees and Sadducees plotted to trap him with the questions, should we pay taxes to Caesar? And Jesus simply answered, show me the coin whose image does it bear. They answered, Caesar's. So he told them, render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. And the final one was, what's the greatest commandment? One by one, Jesus answered with divine wisdom, silencing them completely so that no one dared question him further. We know that the greatest commandment is to love God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your being. And the singing is like it, to love one another as you love yourself. And that's when we get the golden rule. After this, Jesus returned to the crowds and his disciples and gave fiery rebuke to the Pharisees. He called them their pride, their greed, and their spiritual blindness. Over and over he said, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. His voice trembled with sorrow as he looked over the city of Jerusalem. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who killed the prophets and stone those sent to you. How often I have longed to gather your children together as the hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. As they left the temple, Jesus' disciples marveled at its grandeur. Look, teacher, what massive stones! But Jesus said something shocking. Do you see all these great buildings? Not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down. Later, sitting on the Mount of Olives, overlooking the temple, Jesus told his disciples what was coming. He spoke of the destruction of Jerusalem, the end of the age, and his eventual return in glory. This was the all-event discourse, a powerful teaching about staying watchful, faithful, vigilant, and ready. It's quoted here, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour. As the sun set over Jerusalem that Tuesday evening, the religious leaders intensified their plans to arrest him. But Jesus kept teaching. He knew the time was drawing near. Wednesday of Holy Week is often called the silent day, not because nothing happened, but because the Gospel don't record many public actions by Jesus on that day. But behind the scenes, the Pharisees and religious leaders were putting into plot to kill Jesus, and one of his own began to turn. Wednesday of Holy Week is the quiet before the storm. It was just 2 days before the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread. Jerusalem was crowded with pilgrims, everyone who was coming in, and the air was thick with tension and anticipation. Jesus had not gone to the temple that day. After 3 intense days of public teaching, confrontation, and prophecy, he likely stayed in Bethany, just outside the city, possibly resting with his disciples and preparing for what was to come. But what Jesus was still, his enemies were not. The chief priests, the scribes, and elders gathered secretly in the palace of Caiaphas, the high priest. They were determined to find a way to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him, for they feared the people who viewed Jesus as a true prophet. Not during the festival, they said, or there may be a riot among the people. At the same time, something deeply personal and heartbreaking was beginning to unfold. One of the original 12, Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priest. No one knew exactly what tipped him over the edge. Greed, disillusionment, confusion, all of the above. And Satan, I think it's Satan entered him, and these in his mind, he offered them what they had been waiting for when he said, "When will you give me him? I hand him over to you." The chief priests were thrilled. They counted out 30 silver coins, the price of a slave, and gave it to him. From that moment on, Judas began looking for the right time and place to betray Jesus away from the crowds. Meanwhile, back in Bethany, a quiet moment of love and devotion was taking place in the house of Simon the leper. As Jesus reclined on the table, a woman came with an alabaster jar filled with very expensive perfume. Without a word, she broke the jar and poured the perfume over his head. Some of those at the table were indignant. Why this waste? That perfume could have been sold and the money given to the poor. But Jesus talked to them. Leave her alone. She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. And then he said something remarkable. Truly, I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. So Wednesday was not truly silent. It was a day of secrets and sacrifice. Going back over that, all women anointed the Son of God in love, and disciples sold him out for silver, and the religious leaders finalized their plot. The stage was now set. The storm was coming. Thursday, also known as Maundy Thursday, from the Latin mandatum or command, because of Jesus' command to love one another. This is the night of the Last Supper and foot washing in Gethsemane, and ultimately the betrayal by Judas Iscariot. As the sun began to ascend, The streets of Jerusalem buzzed with preparation. It was the first day of unleavened bread, the time to eat the Passover, in memory of coming out of Egypt. Jesus sent Peter and John ahead to make arrangements. Going to the city, he told them, and you will meet a man carrying a jar of water. Follow him, and say to the owner of the house he enters. The teacher asks, where is my guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples? He will show you a large upper room furnished and ready. That evening, Jesus reclined at the table with his 12 disciples in that upper room. As they ate the Passover meal together, Jesus' heart was heavy. He knew one was coming. He looked around the table and said, I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. And then something unexpected happened. Jesus got up, took off his outer garment, wrapped a towel around his waist, and poured water into a basin. One by one, he knelt and began to wash his disciples' feet, a job reserved for the lowly servant. When he came to Peter, the disciple protested, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus answered, you do not realize what I'm doing, but later you will understand. Afterward, he said, now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciple, if you love one another. As they resumed the meal, Jesus became troubled in spirit. Truly, I tell you, one of you will betray me. The room grew tense. Each disciple asked, isn't I, Lord? Jesus dipped a piece of bread and handed it to Judas Iscariot. What you are about to do it quickly, Jesus said. Judas took the bread and left. It was night. After he had gone, Jesus took the bread, gave thanks, and broke it. He gave it to the disciples, saying, this is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And then he took the cup. This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Poured out for many for the forgiveness of sin. It was a sacred moment, the first communion, and a glimpse of the cross. Before they left, Jesus had something deeply personal. A new command I give you: love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. They sang a hymn and then walked down into the night to the Mount of Olives. On the way, Jesus warned them, "This very night you will all fall away on account of me. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee." Peter protested, "Even if all fall away, I never will." Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, this very night before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." Then came to a garden called Gethsemane. Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go and pray." He took Peter, James, and John a little further, and his soul was in agony. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." He went a bit further, fell on his face and prayed, "Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." He prayed 3 times, and each time the disciples fell asleep. And it's understandable, they had been going on day and night for several days trying to do everything and preach the good news with Jesus. Finally, Jesus said, "Look, the hour has come. Rise, let us go. My betrayer is near." Just then, Judas arrived, leading a crowd on with swords and clubs. He walked up to Jesus and gave him a kiss, the sign of betrayal. "Rabbi," Judas said. Jesus replied, "Friend, do what you came for." The soldiers seized Jesus. Peter drew his sword and cut off the high priest's servant's ear. But Jesus stopped him. "Put your sword away. Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once send 12 legions of angels?" He touched the servant's ears and healed him. Then Jesus was arrested, and all his disciples fled. Now we come to Good Friday, the most somber and powerful day of the story of redemption. It's the day Jesus was betrayed, beaten, condemned, crucified, and buried. And the crucifixion of Jesus, and the night had turned cold. Jesus had been arrested in Gethsemane, betrayed by a kiss from Judas, and abandoned by his disciples. He was bound and taken first to Ananias, the former high priest, and then to Caiaphas, when the chief priest and Sanhedrin gathered there in the dead of night. They held a mock trial. False witnesses were brought in. Accusations flew, but Jesus remained silent. Finally, the high priest demanded, "I charge you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." Jesus replied, "You have said so, but I tell you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." In a fury, the high priest tore his robes. "Blasphemy!" he shouted, and then condemned Jesus to death. They spat on him, struck him, and mocked him. Meanwhile, outside of the courtyard, Peter was watching from a distance. 3 times someone asked him if he knew Jesus, just as prophesied. He denied it 3 times. As the rooster crowed, Peter remembered Jesus' words and wept bitterly. At daybreak, Jesus was taken to Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, because Jewish leaders had no authority to execute him. Pilate questioned Jesus, confused by his calm. "Are you the King of Jews?" "My kingdom is not of this world," Jesus said. Pilate found no fault in him, but the crowd was turned up. Pilate sent Jesus to Herod, who mocked him and sent him back. Again, Pilate tried to release him, even offering a prisoner named Barabbas in exchange, but the crowd shouted all the louder, turned on by the high priest, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" So Pilate washed his hands and gave the order. Jesus was scourged, and a crown of thorns pressed onto his head. He was beaten, robed in purple, and mocked, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And then they led him away to be crucified. And Jesus, weakened and bleeding, carried his cross through the streets of Jerusalem. A man named Simon of Cyrene was forced to help carry it because Jesus was so weak and bleeding. When they reached Golgotha, also known as the place of the skull, they nailed Jesus to a cross between 2 criminals. It was the third hour, which is about 9 a.m., and a sign was placed above his head. Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. His soldiers cast lots for his clothing. People passed by and mocked him. The religious leaders sneered. He saved others, but he can't save himself. Let him come down from the cross, and we will believe him. One of the criminals even joined in the insult, but the other rebuked him. We are punished justly, but this man has done nothing wrong. Then he turned and said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus replied, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. And that's a powerful moment of the criminal's salvation. I want you all to take a moment of silence to reflect on that. Standing near the cross were Jesus' mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, and John, the beloved disciple. Jesus looked down and said, Woman, behold your son, son, behold your mother. He was giving them to each other as family, not just his followers. From noon until around 3 p.m., darkness covered the land. Then Jesus cried out in agony, my God, why have you forsaken me? After that, he breathed his last and said, it is finished. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And then Jesus died. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn from top to bottom, so there was no way that it could have been done earthly. The earth shook, tombs broke open, and the Roman centurion declared, surely this was the Son of God. As evening approached, a man named Joseph of Arimathea, a secret follower of Jesus, asked Pilate for his body. With Pilate's permission, Joseph and Nicodemus, another secret follower, carefully wrapped Jesus in linen and spices to prepare him for burial and place him in a new tomb cut from the rock. A great stone was rolled in front of it, and the Sabbath was about to begin. The world had grown still. The Son of God lay in a borrowed grave. Come back next week on Resurrection Sunday for the victory and the end of the story. God bless you all. Have a good week.